We are continuing today in Perek Chaf Aleph in Mesillas Yesharim. The Ramchal says as follows: Ach mafsidia chasidus. So those things which detract or prevent a person from acquiring the midah of chasidus, hematrados v'hadagos. Really, he says, tirdan daiga represents worries and preoccupation. Kibiosa sechel tar v'nechbaz bedagos basakov iefshelo lifnos elais boninos hazeh. So remember again in the previous shiur, the Ramchal spoke about the idea that in order to acquire chasidus, one has to engage in hisboninos and hisbodidus, so being alone with oneself and introspection, contemplation about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the greatness of Hashem, the chesed of Hashem, where I am, where I want to get to be, everything Hashem does for me, and therefore by definition my need to reciprocate. So the Ramchal says, in order to be able to be a contemplative person, a person has to free themselves of worries and preoccupation. Obviously, if a person is preoccupied and constantly preoccupied, constantly worried, that leaves no room for introspection, no room for contemplative thought. He goes on, he says, and obviously without contemplation, there's no chasidus. So afil masigu kvar, hine atrados machrichos esasechel, u'ma'arbabos oso, ve'inam manichem oso, lihis Hachzek biyira biyava b'shar yonam hashayach malachasidus kasher zacharti. So this is really an incredibly profound idea that Ramchal explains that it's such a simple yet profound yesod. When a person is preoccupied with worries and with difficulties in life, it doesn't leave them the bandwidth to be an introspective and thoughtful person. And without introspection, without a sense of thoughtfulness, by definition, a person cannot achieve chasidus. Alkin amru zichron livracha. In Ashchina Shora, lo mitoch atzus, lo mitoch kalas rosh, lo mitoch dvar b'telim, el mitoch dvar simcha shel mitzvah. Therefore, Chazal said, the Shechina, divine presence, doesn't rest upon a person in a state of sadness, in a state of laziness, in a state of, lightheadedness, or just meaningless or empty things. The only thing the Shechina resides in a person is a result of simcha shel mitzvah, the joy associated with the performance of a mitzvah. The idea being that in order to have a connection with the Shechina, with the divine presence, a person has to be in the right contemplative state. So if I'm preoccupied with worries and with difficulties, then by definition, I don't have the ability to be contemplative. Kol shekin ha'nos v'tanugim shem ha'vachim ma'amish ala chasidus, ki hinehim mafatim esalev limoshech ha'acharem esar mikol inyonei aprishus v'ayidiyah amitis. And all the more so, preoccupation with physical pleasure certainly derails one from becoming the contemplative person necessary for going ahead and mastering the trait of chasidus. So what Ramchal is really describing over here is something incredibly profound, because you think about this and we wonder to ourselves, okay, that's great. None of us really want to be preoccupied with difficulties and worries, but such is the nature of life. So before we get to the strategy, what Ramchal is highlighting for us, I think, is what for many of us is what stands between us and chasidus, which is I'm constantly worried. I'm constantly preoccupied with that worry. And as such, I don't have the cognitive or the spiritual expansiveness or bandwidth to really be able to contemplate all of the necessary things that are the prerequisite to becoming a chassid. And now, it all makes sense. It's not that I don't want chasidus. It's not that I don't care about chasidus. It's not that I don't yearn for chasidus. But at the end of the day, I'm simply preoccupied. I'm simply fundamentally preoccupied with everything that's worrying me in life. And as such, there is no bandwidth for hisbonos, for inner contemplation. So what is the strategy? I know the problem. Now what's the strategy? So what's the strategy? So this is incredible. What's the strategy to avoid being constantly preoccupied with life's problems and worries? Is bitachon, belief in Hashem, a belief in Hashem and a reliance on Hashem and a sense of security as a result of my relationship with Hashem. To literally again cast your burden upon Hashem, recognizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has your back. And whatever it is that you are supposed to have in this world, ultimately Hashem will give you. Now, the unwritten part that Ramchal is really highlighting is as well as that, and worrying about stuff is not going to give you any more. right? Worrying is not going to provide you with any more in this world than you would have had, without worrying. Sometimes we think the more I worry, the more successful I'll be, or the more I worry, the more ultimately, again, I'll be able to acquire. But it's not true. So in other words, what the Ramchal says is a person has to have a sense of bitachon. Whatever Hashem wants from me, that is what's going to be. And whatever Hashem wants from me, that's ultimately what's best for me. And constantly worrying over something doesn't change that fact. All it does is it derails me from accomplishing other things in this world. As Chazal said, a person's parnasa, literally mizornos is food, means a person's parnasa is already determined for him at the beginning of the year. Not only that, but again, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has set aside for me, no one else could touch. No one else could touch. If Hashem set it aside for me, that means it's for me and for me only, and no one else has any ability to encroach and to infringe upon that. Now the truth is, so what Ramchal is describing over here is bitachon. Bitachon is the antidote to excessive worry. Now again, is a person going to worry to eliminate all worry? I don't know a person who has eliminated all worry. Maybe there are people like that in this world. But at least to prevent ourselves from getting lost in the overwhelming sense of worrying in this world. Because again, being consumed with worry, by definition prevents me from being introspective or contemplative, and therefore by definition prevents me from becoming a chassid. But with bitachon, I recognize that everything comes from Hashem. Hashem has my back. Hakadosh Baruch Hu has ordained for me what is supposed to occur. My parnos is taken care of, my needs are taken care of, and therefore to a certain degree, I just have to learn to trust. I have to learn to trust. He goes on, he says, because in the beginning, he explains, really, at the beginning of creation, before Adam went ahead and sinned, so the truth is, ultimately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was just going to provide straight out for man. Now, as a result of the sin of Adam, the pasuk says, "B'zeh sapecha tochal lechem," to the sweat of your brow you'll eat bread. Asher al kein chayiv adam lishtadel ezeh ishtadel l'satzarach parnasaso shekein gozer hamelech ha'alyon v'harizeh kimas shepareach kol min ha'anoshi asher ein li malit mimenu. So obviously, as a result of the sin of Adam and Chava, now man has to struggle for his livelihood. Alkin Amru, Yachal Afilu Yoshevu Batal, Tamalomar Bechol Masiyad Chasher Ta'asa. So this is incredible. So the Ramchal says, now let's be clear. Now, as a result of the post-sin of Adam and Chava world, man has to put in effort. So to say, in other words, what the Ramchal is highlighting over here is don't think that not worrying about things means that you're free from putting in effort. No, you have to put in effort, right? That's the gzeira. You have to put in your effort in order to be able to reap the bounty that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in store for you. But he writes, Achlo, Shishtadlus hu amoil, ela shishtadlus muchrach. V'chevan shishtadl hariyotze yidei chavaso, ukvar yishmakum leber chashem shetishra ala ve'ino tzarech levalos yom b'charitzas v'ishtadlus. This is incredible. The Ramchal says, but just be aware of one thing in life. In life, the determinant of your success is not your hishtadlus. The determinant of your success is your bitachon, is your ability and your willingness to rely on Hashem. But the only way that bitachon brings about results in this world is through man putting in some level of hishtadlus. And once I put in my effort, then I have to dispense with the worry, recognizing I've done my part, and now Hashem will do His. Quoting over here, Psukim. For both Tilma and Mishlei, highlighting this idea. Elo, haderach hamiti hu darkam shel hasidim harishonim. But rather, again, the proper derech, says the Ramchal, is the derech, is the pathway of the early pious ones. What did they do? Osin Torah and Ikra Malachton Tfeilah. They made their Torah study. Now, Torah study in this context doesn't just mean Torah study, it means pursuit of spirituality, the primary part of their existence. And Malacha, their work, was the secondary. Now, and then the Gemara says, V'zeh, v'zeh, niskaiban. And they were successful in both. They were successful spiritually, they were successful materially. For once a person does some amount of malacha, some amount of work, some ishtadlus, Misham Bahala Ein Lo Ela Livtach Bekono V'lo Lehitztar Ashum Davar Olami. From that point forward, he has to put his faith in Hashem and not lose himself in the preoccupation of worry. So this is really an incredible idea. This is such a profound idea in general that Ramchal is saying it's just the way to kind of approach life, which is, I have to put in ishtatlus. If you want something out of this world, you have to put in effort. You have to put in effort. But it's not my effort that ultimately determines my results, but rather it's my bitachon. It's how much I believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu truly could bring about the desired results for me and how Hashem has my back. It's just that in this world, I can't just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I have to do something. But it's not the effort that ultimately determines the success. It's the bitachon that accompanies the effort that determines the success. Therefore, again, the proper derech, says the Ramchal, is put in your hishtadlus, put in your requisite effort, however that's determined, and then believe that you've done your part, and now HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do his. But the beautiful part is, once that bitachon sets in, then the worry dissipates. What Ramchal says is that constant perpetual worry or preoccupation with worry about what's going to happen, what's going to be, essentially represents a lack of bitachon. If I have proper bitachon, then the worry itself dissipates. Such an incredible idea. Now, once I have proper bitachon, the worry dissipates. Then says Ramchal, va'az tishaer daito penuya, v'liba muchan lechasidus hamiti v'lavodat iman. This is how the parak ends. And therefore, again, once now my mind is free, and I'm no longer constantly preoccupied with worry, then I have the ability to truly contemplate the essence of Chasidus. So this is really, if we kind of bring this all together, so it turns out that Ramchal explains that the real way to go ahead and acquire Chasidus is hisbonenus, is contemplation. The multi-part contemplation that we spoke about in yesterday's shiur, this idea of the greatness of Hashem, where God is, where I am, how I want to bridge that gap, the chesed, the kindness that Hashem bestows upon me, and how I want to reciprocate that kindness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as all by going above and beyond. But that contemplation could only exist if I give myself the proper mind space. Right? There has to be bandwidth for that. And what Ramchal is highlighting is that so often there's not bandwidth. There's no bandwidth. Do you know why there's no bandwidth? Because I'm always worried. I'm always worried. So Ramchal says, that's where I have to work on my bitachon. And bitachon just means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has my back. The Ribono Shel Olam has a plan for me. I'm obligated to put in my effort. That's my obligation. But once I put in my effort, I have to then kind of step back and fall into HaKadosh Baruch Hu's embrace of bitachon. Hashem, you've got this. Once I have that bitachon, then I have the bandwidth for contemplation. And once I have the bandwidth for contemplation, then I have the ability to actualize the midah of Chasidus. Incredible. This is the end of Parak Chaf Aleph. Mazel Tov. Emir Tashem tomorrow. We begin Parak Chaf Beis. Wishing everyone a wonderful day.